Welcome back. We're going to take a look right here at the injector leak-off test for the individual injector blocking, as well as the pressure relief valve check. The relief valve, PRV valve, is located on the common rail, which is under the valve cover, as well as all of the injectors and injector lines on these Cursor engines. So we're here in the lab because it's a little bit easier on an engine that we've got here off vehicle to demonstrate how you need to connect up to perform these last couple of checks for your system should you have excessive flow from the injectors. So first thing we need to do is get the valve cover out of the way. And then we'll get set up. We're here. The first step in the under the valve cover investigation is to take a look at the pressure relief valve. The PRV valve is located in the far end of the rail, the opposite end from the rail pressure sensor. And this tube is where any bypass from a failed pressure relief or an open pressure relief would go through. Now, normally there is no flow through this line. So we're going to take this off here for our test, and we're going to set this aside for a minute here, out of the way. We have to cap this off because the return flow from the injectors would push back up here along with the flow from the common rail systems. And now we're going to install a fitting on our common rail. We're going to take our hose, remove our cap, connect this up, and take our plug out of the opposite side. We're going to put it in a large container, and we're going to start the engine up. And if the pressure relief valve is functioning correctly, there will be no flow through this hose. If there is flow through this hose, either the pressure relief has failed or the pressure relief valve itself is not tight in the rail itself. Any leakage here causes rapid degradation due to the high pressures from the common rail system. So even if it is leaking ever so slightly, the PRV valve, the relief, will probably need to be replaced. Once we're done with our testing, the removal is fairly straightforward. Disconnect our hose. We always want to make sure that we put our caps back in place. This does a couple of things. If there's any residual fuel in the lines, it keeps it from leaking. And the second reason is to keep dirt out of the hoses and fittings. Take our fitting off, and we remove our cap, reinstall the line, and tighten the fittings down. Now, if we didn't find any leakage out of the PRV valve, the reason that we're here in the first place is because we had excess flow in our injector test. So if the PRV valve's not leaking, then it's one of our injectors. We're going to move on, and we're going to start at number 1, and we're going to show you how to do that test and block the injector rail off next. Okay, we've completed our PRV check. The PRV valve, if it's functioning correctly and we still had excessive flow from our injector leak-off test, our original injector leak-off test, we now need to go through and block off each one of the injectors one at a time using a special cap. The process involves taking the injector line off, putting the cap on the common rail, and starting the engine, running it for the 60 seconds, collecting the fuel in the graduated cylinder, and comparing that to the original value that you had from the original test. Now, what we would do is we take that original value and we would subtract the value that we get here. The difference is how much this injector has for leakage. This entire cycle needs to be repeated for each of the injectors in order to get a comprehensive view of all of the injectors, to analyze them to determine which injectors are at fault and contributing to the excessive amount of flow that's coming from this engine. So let's get started with this. We're going to block this off. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to show you a shot of the live engine running, and we're collecting the fuel again as we did in the original step to determine that we had a problem. So you need to make sure that this gets fastened down tight, because again, this is common rail. This is up to almost 30,000 pounds of pressure on this rail, so you do need to make sure that this special adapter fitting gets put in place here. We don't have to worry about disconnecting the electrical from the injector line, and we just need to make sure that our injector line itself is out of the way of the valve train, because the engine needs to be running. The valve cover can be set back in place for this test, so we don't have to worry about oil flying all over the place, and there'll be a minimal chance of leakage on the outside of the engine. So with that, let's go back out on engine, and we're going to rerun our test, and we're going to take our specifications, and we're going to see how we did. Okay, as we see, we've got less fuel than we had in our original test. The difference here, of course, is the injector that we have blocked off is no longer contributing to the amount of fuel that's being leaked. The difference, by doing a little bit of subtraction here, subtracting from the original value the amount that we collected this time, we end up with how much the injector we have blocked off, in this case number 1, is leaking, and what that contribution is to the overall leakage of the injectors. Repeating this test on each of the cylinders will give you the same results for those individual injectors, and you'll find out what the leakage rate is for each of the individual injectors. You compare these to specifications to determine which of the injectors is contributing the most amount of fuel, and whether or not they're within specifications or not. Once you're completed with the tests, we want to put everything back together again. We're going to come in, take our block-off adapter off, connect up our lines. Things that we need to be aware of whenever we're servicing anything underneath in this common rail area under the valve cover. It's very difficult to determine if you've got any fuel leakage as a result of being in here. You may have a line that may seep or may leak very subtly over the course of time. And it's very difficult to determine because, again, this is covered up by the valve cover, very difficult to access. And then you do want to make sure that you monitor the unit after the unit's back in service for at least 10 to 20 hours. Check the oil level very, very regularly. If you see the oil level increasing, this is a sign that there is fuel leaking from somewhere inside of the engine, causing that oil level to rise. Fuel dilution in the oil system is going to accelerate wear on the engine and can cause extreme damage in a very short period of time. So it's critical whenever dealing with any of these fuel system components that you go back and you monitor the oil level after you put the unit back together again. With all of that, good luck with your testing. Have a good day.